So there's a very good book on the Paramitas by Dale Wright, who's a Buddhist scholar. It's somewhat scholarly, but I really like something that he says in the introduction, which is to study the Paramitas is to raise the question, how shall I live? How shall I live? What kind of person do I wish to be? And what he suggests, we know that the param, but they are also practices that we follow in the process of really honing our character. And I'll talk more about that later. The scholar Donald Lopez describes the etymology of the term paramita. It's commonly translated as perfection, and it has two etymologies. The first derives from the word parama, which means the highest or the most distant, therefore the chief or the primary. We were talking last week about Sojin saying that in his lectures he always tried to go to the fundamental. And I think that's an appropriate gloss on the word as well. So it can be rendered as excellence or perfection. As I said, the other etymology divides the word paramita into para and mita. Para means beyond, means the further bank or the shore or the boundary, and mita means that which has arrived. So paramita means that which has gone beyond, or that which has gone to the other shore. And this reflection is also reflected in the Tibetan translation of the word, which means gone to the other shore. The Chinese character that is used for the word paramita means crossing over to the other shore, which is the shore of non-fear and the shore of liberation. So this practice of the paramitas is the natural practice of bodhisattvas, and it is how we can live our lives. So let me say what they are. This is all outlined in Thich Nhat Hanh's book. You can find it in the Prajna Paramita Sutra, Prajna Paramita. So that's really embedded in our fundamental teachings. It's embedded in the Heart Sutra, which we chant every day, in a large number of other texts. And so these 6 perfections are as follows. Dana Paramita means generosity or giving. Shila Paramita, Shila being the precepts, the ethics or morality or discipline of proper conduct. This is the rule for monks. Kshanti, which is patience, tolerance, forbearance, endurance. And I'm going to talk a bit more about this as we go on, because I think that Thich Nhat Hanh and Suzuki Roshi have very interesting and very useful ways of framing the paramita of Kshanti. Virya paramita, which means energy or diligence or effort. And of course, there's a logic in which that fits with patience. In order to practice patience, sometimes we have to make a big effort. There's jhana, Dhyana paramita, which is meditation or concentration. Most literally, it means a kind of one-pointed concentration, which is an element of our meditation practice. And finally, the critical one, which is prajnaparamita, which is wisdom. It's insight into the nature of reality. And it is the catalyst, the transformative element that works with all of the other paramitas. It catalyzes them to make them bodhisattva practices. Now, I'll say a little more about that. So really, all of these practices, all these paramitas, the 6 of them, each one of them implies all the others and includes all the others. So you can think of them as virtues or as values. These are values that lead our life and lead our practice. They are also practices. But I think that each one of them needs to be then applied to the various practices that we have. So these are the values of those practices to me. And they point towards how we move towards liberation as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And prajna is the paramita that really makes them perfections. That the first 5 are, in a sense, you can do them as virtuous action in the mundane world. But when they are infused with prajna, then they become part of the realization of our full Buddha nature. They're really the basis for training for people who are practicing on the path of enlightenment. Prajnaparamita opens the door for all the others. So if we look at one of the chapters of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Suzuki Roshi talks about Dana Prajna Paramita. So he talks about giving as a manifestation of wisdom. And you can think of all of these as a manifestation of wisdom. Giving, morality, patience, effort, and meditation. So we come back to Prajna. There's a couple of passages that I wanted to read you that are quite parallel. And I'm starting with Prajna because as I said, it infuses everything. So in the heart of the Buddha's teaching, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, "Let us look at a wave on the surface of the ocean. A wave is a wave. It has a beginning and an end. It might be high or low, more or less beautiful than other waves. But a wave is at the same time water. Water is the ground of being of the wave. It's important that a wave knows she is water and not just a wave. We too live our life as an individual. Our life as an individual as a wave. We believe that we have a beginning and an end, that we are separate from other living beings. That's why the Buddha advised us to look more deeply in order to touch the ground of our being, which is nirvana. Everything bears deeply the nature of nirvana. Everything has been nirvanaized. And then he speaks very much in line with our teaching, Sojin's teaching, Dogen's teaching. He says, we don't have to attain nirvana because we ourselves are always dwelling in nirvana. The wave does not have to look for water. It already is water. We are one with the ground of our being. And that's really, to me, it's a beautiful passage. And the other day I was reading in a book by Rabbi Rami Shapiro called The Hebrew Prophets. And I was surprised to find very similar kind of analogy. He's saying, he's talking about the non-duality of God. God as I am who am. He says, think of it this way. The ocean manifests an infinite number of waves. It is its nature to do so. It's not a matter of choice. It is what it is to be an ocean. The ocean has a current. This too is not a matter of choice. It simply is what is. Now, God manifests being the way the ocean raises waves. And then he says, and this is interesting, and this is getting into perhaps theological discourse. He said, and God has a current, justice, compassion, and humility is celebrated by the prophets. This is a book on the Hebrew prophets. Unlike waves, however, you have a choice to flow with the current or against it. It is not that God will punish you if you choose to go against the current of godliness. As with the ocean, you can swim against the current, but doing so will exhaust you and you will drown. Swimming with the current, on the other hand, allows the ocean to sustain you and to carry you. So I think there's quite a few similarities here. And maybe I'll let me stop here and just see if there are any comments or questions at this point. You can raise your digital hand, and I think, will Yoni or Raghav call on you? I'm not sure.
I'll call on them.
Okay, so if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand. There's one from Heather.
Hi, Hozan. So you talked about this a little indirectly, but I wonder if you could say it explicitly to make sure I understand it. Would the precepts be considered the tools or the action steps to experiment or experience the paramitas?
What I did say was that all of the paramitas are in relationship to all the other paramitas.
Uh-huh.
You can enter at any point. You can enter by way of meditation. You can enter by way of precepts. But the precepts are part of the threefold training,
Mm-hmm.
which is the whole of the Buddhist vision. Mm-hmm. That threefold training is morality, concentration, and wisdom. Shila, samadhi, and prajna.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible, for example, that one could practice very deep concentration and conceivably ignore morality.
Mm-hmm.
That can happen. The example that I always give, went back to a couple of episodes of The Sopranos that I watched, where this guy came out of prison where he became a very adept yogin,
Uh-huh.
but he was a stone killer. He had no morality, and other teachers have been asked this question. So the thing is that the threefold training, all of those have to interact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's also true that on our Kechimiyaku, those who have had lay or priest ordination, it says that that it was transmitted from Bodhidharma that the precepts are the single gate to the practice. So I think that morality is essential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's an inseparable element. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think you're saying it's a very helpful framework or set of practices, the precepts, and it's not the whole of it, but it's a really great place to start.
But it can be the whole of it.
Uh-huh.
The thing about the precepts to me is they are instructions for how we relate to things,
Mm-hmm.
how we relate to things and how we relate to people and how we relate to ourselves. To me, they are all instructions for relationship. And I think at the heart of this practice is the awakening to the fact that of oneness, of our connection to everything. And so the precepts are very particular tools for how to arrive at that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And you find them in the Jewish tradition. It's really interesting. There's, I have a couple of books on it, very on what's called Lashon Hara, which is, wrong speech, basically. And it is very, very detailed. Our precepts are pretty detailed. It says, do not elevate yourself above others, do not lie, and so forth. But these Talmudic commentary, the Talmudic commentary on Lashon Hara just goes into great detail about what is right and what is not right speech.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting. Really interesting.
Okay.
And I don't feel that it's at odds with what we are doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you.
Gary?
Hozan, do you think your reading of the Jewish tradition and comparing it somewhat to the Buddhist tradition, that there's a universality that comes through us as humans, and that it's pretty typical to find the same things in various religions?
Well, I think that, this is what is sometimes called perennial wisdom. And, it cuts across it covers a lot of territory. And you also hear the expression sort of all roads lead up the same mountain, right? I don't think that all roads lead up the same mountain. I think all roads lead up to the top of a mountain in a huge range. And we, it's like we stand on the top and we yodel to each other. It might be different paths. It might be some different particularities, but you find similar ethical and moral principles in many, I wouldn't say all, but many religions.
But it seems like something, it's kind of like you go outside and you say, this is amazing. And that is common.
That is universal.
Pardon me?
Yeah, I think that the or the awe is common to all of us.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Carol?
You said that the Paramitas are embedded in the Heart Sutra. So I was looking at the Paramitas, and is that more not so literal, but just that all of these, to really understand the Heart Sutra, we would need to be practicing those? I don't know why there's that feedback.
It might be me. Let me shut that for a moment.
Because I was looking, giving. I don't see that so much in the Heart Sutra literally, but so I was just curious about what you meant by that. They're embedded in the Heart Sutra.
Well, I think it's that Prajna Paramita includes all of the Paramitas. You don't have Prajna Paramita is not a standalone thing. It is intimately related to all of the other five. And
but you said embedded in the Heart Sutra. I was thinking of the Heart Sutra.
Yeah, I'm not meaning literally in terms of the words. I'm meaning in terms of uh, the centrality of prajna.
Hmm.
And it's clear that if you have prajna, then the bodhisattvas are doing all these other practices.
Hmm.
And you do find them spelled out. The Prajna Paramita, the Heart Sutra, is a highly compressed version of the larger
Yeah.
Prajna Paramita sutras. And in those, they are spelled out directly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think let me go on, okay? The first paramita is dana paramita. And dana is a Sanskrit term that means giving. It means to give freely with a heart of compassion, to give without expecting anything in return. And the practice of dana was really laid out by Shakyamuni Buddha as the practice of lay people. But it's also the practice of the monks. But the lay people were encouraged to give, and they were the ones who, it's without their giving, uh, the monastic communities would not survive. So we offer gifts of many kinds. And I think that going back to the heart of giving is just the activity of connection. So you have there are different interpretations of kinds of giving. At a base level, there's the giving of material goods, the things that we need for survival. And for a person, facing, say, a disaster, or in a refugee camp, or in a war zone, the need for the goods of survival are a matter of life or death. So that's a first priority in that context. On a higher level, our giving is the giving of the Dharma, the giving of the teachings. And this is what our teachers did their whole lives. This is what Sojin did and what Suzuki Roshi did, and so many of the ancestors going back in all kinds of Buddhist traditions. They dedicated their lives to just giving these teachings, because the teachings are teachings of liberation. The teachings of liberation in the context of resolving the issues of suffering. There are also teachings of liberation in a mundane source, in a mundane nature. I'm thinking of it. I'm really thinking about it today, since the Congress approved, the Congress and President Biden voted to make Juneteenth a national holiday, which is remarkable. And that is recognizing the historical fact of liberation. But there's further to go. the highest level is fearlessness. And this is what is spoken of to me in the pivotal verse of the Heart Sutra, where it says, without hindrance, no fears exist. And so the Prajnaparamita Sutra is a sutra that is designed to remove us from the hindrance of thinking of things as having a self nature. But the point of that is so that we can face the circumstances of each moment with fearlessness. And finally, the point of that fearlessness is so that we can simply connect. And that connection is, we all understand it, we all feel it when it happens, and it's yet it's very mysterious. So I've often read this, that in thinking about giving, one of my favorite books is The Gift by Lewis Hyde. And if you haven't read it, I really encourage you to read it. Lewis Hyde he has a very strong Buddhist background, but he's delving in this book into anthropology, social history, and psychoanalysis. And at one point in the book, he describes dinner at a village restaurant, just an ordinary restaurant in the south of France. And he writes this: the patrons sit at a long communal table, and each finds before his plate a modest bottle of wine. Before the meal begins, a man will pour his wine not into his own glass, but into his neighbor's. And his neighbor will return the gesture, filling the first person's empty glass. In an economic sense, nothing has happened. No one has any more wine than he would have if he poured his own. But society has appeared where there was none before. And if you think about those of you who have some awareness of Japanese traditions, in Japan, you always pour tea for the other person. You don't pour your own tea. And sometimes we do that if you're, in some places they have oryoki where you're passing the bowl washing water down the tan or across the table, and you don't pour your own water. You pour water for your neighbor, and then you give them the teapot and they pour water for you. So the idea of that is the creation, the very literal, not symbolic, the very literal creation of society. And it's really beautiful. So this dana is a circular activity. It's the activity of the giver, the receiver, and the gift. And often what we forget is that this circle, the circle has to be unbroken. That if we hoard a gift for ourselves, if we don't pass it on in one form or another, then we're actually breaking the circle. Suzuki Roshi talked about this. It's a wonderful piece of a lecture that I found in the Windbell. I think I have it someplace on my computer, talking about money, where he was saying he just believes in it flowing and circulating. And I find that really inspiring. Instead of trying to keep it for yourself, give it away. Let others benefit for it from it. And when that happens, then often more flows in to oneself. But you don't do it for that reason. Actually, pure generosity is simply giving and forgetting. We say the emptiness of the giver, the gift, and the one who receives. So, with an empty hand, I offer an empty gift to an empty receiver, and what arises is gratitude. What arises is connection. Dogen talks about this in the first section of the Bodhisattvas for Embracing Dharmas, Shishobo. He says, giving means not to be greedy. Not to be greedy means not to crave. Not to crave means, in worldly expression, not to flatter. So he's really digging down here. You know, he's talking about, he's not just talking about values, he's talking about actual practices, not to flatter. If I flatter someone, invariably, it's because I want something from that person, right? So if you eliminate flattery from your social, your social repertoire, then you're allowing something else to happen. Later in this paragraph, he says, we must simply and unfailingly not be greedy. It is like offering treasures that are going to be discarded to people we do not know. Which is really interesting right now, because our driveway is filled with these treasures. And we've been giving them away from the weekend, and just I've been watching people kind of sort through some of these things. Somebody came by yesterday, there's a big couch out there. And they said, oh, this must be an heirloom. And I said, well, I don't know if it's an heirloom, but it's really a beautiful piece of furniture. We just don't need it now, and somebody might. So it's to be like offering treasures that are going to be discarded to people we do not know. That happens every time we put stuff out in the, on the curb. Very literally, it's like giving flowers blooming on the distant mountains to the Tathagata. I love that expression. Just, it just fills my heart. The flowers don't belong to us. They don't belong to Tathagata. And in our day and age, compared to Dogen's day and age, in our day and age, it takes a conscious effort to allow flowers to bloom on the hillside. We were driving to the airport the other day in South San Francisco, and what we saw, those beautiful, they're greenish or brownish, depending on the season. These beautiful hillsides in South San Francisco. that are filled with grasses and wildflowers in the right season. And now the developers are creeping up the hillsides, and you can see the houses. So to leave flowers the space to bloom is a remarkable thing in our time. It says a gift is never disregarded for its small value, but our effort should be genuine. My favorite line in this whole passage is in the next paragraph. He says, we offer ourselves to ourselves and we offer others to others. This is Dana Paramita. This is Dana Prajna Paramita. This is Dana that is fully enacted by wisdom. To give ourselves to ourselves. How do we do that? Of course, that's one of the dimensions of our practice. To give others to others, is there something I can do that allows yoni to be yoni, or a giant to be a giant? I don't have any agency for that. But I think that the way we do it, and this is, I think, totally resonant with Sojin's teaching and Suzuki Roshi's teaching, is just to accept each person as they are in any given moment. That's giving others to others. So I'm going to stop there for a couple minutes. Let's see if there's any questions. I want to, we're not going to get through all the Paramitas, but I want to talk about Kshanti because it's my favorite. But if you have a question or comment, please. Ross?
Thank you, Hozan. I've been thinking about giving others to others as an opportunity to let people find their own way. Because I can't give anything to anyone, but if I not fill the space so much and meet people, and I can trust that with their practice, they will find their way. And I have to fight the my kind of habit or instinct to want to do something for somebody else and help them, which I think is not letting others find others. It's kind of like letting me help you, which is, this sort of a very different dynamic. What do you think?
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I also think sometimes one might see something that can help a friend. Mm-hmm. And when one does, maybe the correct way to offer it is tentatively. Not sort of holding back, but just saying, well, this occurred to me, and I wanted to share it with you. So, I think that sometimes there are things that we might see about others, but basically, this is, again, goes back to the conundrum of the control chapter in where he says the best way to control a person is to give them a wide field, is to watch them, right? Mm-hmm. And then he also says not to ignore them. So to watch them means that we're in some relationship to them. And if we're in a relationship to them, there's going to be some communication.
Yeah.
But I think, for me, it's just like I don't believe that I know anybody else's reality. It's challenging enough to try to figure out what mine is, and I don't believe I know that either.
Well, there's a number of stories where the students thank their teacher for not telling them and letting them find their own way posthumously.
Right. But I will say, hard as it was, I am very grateful for the things that Sojin said to me that he thought I needed to know about.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't always easy to hear, but I never dismissed it.
Well, that's what you signed up for.
Necessarily, but I appreciate it. But that's because we had a relationship.
Right. You signed up for it, so you invite him to
Yes.
critique your practice, and then your practice is refined. Whereas on a more peer level versus teacher-student, it's a little more delicate, I think. So maybe asking if it's okay to give feedback, offer feedback, or I've been thinking about this. Do you have space to listen, to hear me? Then we can have a relationship on that level.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yoni, and then we'll move on.
Hi, Hozan. Before the lecture started, some people were talking about making music. And, sometimes I'll hear a song and I'll feel like the song was this incredible gift to me because it brings something up for me. And I was wondering, since we were talking about, giving others to others, how like creative acts like that, making music or making art, where's that sort of fit in to the Paramitas or just Buddhist life in general?
Well, I'm a big fan of creativity. The kinds of music that I play, are folk based, and not so different from all other kinds of music. But it's music that has been handed on for many, many years. And it's been handed on within a tradition, the same way that the forms that we have in the Zendo are handed on. And the songs that survive because there's something essential in them. If there wasn't something essential, if a song, whether it's the words or the melody, if it doesn't have something that catches people's minds and hearts, then it doesn't survive. It's survival of the fittest music. But in terms of, it's a very subtle thing in terms of actually performing. In the past, I loved performing. I do it a little now. But I only love performing when I'm playing with other people. I do not enjoy it by myself. And what I had to learn the hard way was, I think there was a time when I was somewhat ambitious and my band was somewhat ambitious, and we wanted to get a response, a certain kind of response. And I would play like that with that intention, and I would come out of feeling completely drained and hollow. Because my attention was in getting that response, not in entering the music. And so I just stopped. I just stopped playing that way. I play out. I play as an offering to people, and they can accept it or not. But the real satisfaction is in the larger nexus of communication between the musicians who are on stage and the audience in whatever form that takes, whether it's a listening audience or a dancing audience or something like that. So that, in many ways, that was my training before I came to active Zen practice. Does that make sense? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go on. I want to talk about Shanti because it's really interesting. Shanti is what we translate as patience or forbearance, endurance. In the Pali Suttas, there's a line that I like, which is that patience is the incinerator of defilements. Patience is the incinerator of defilements. Defilements or hindrances. And of course, it's linked very closely to the next paramita, which is virya, or energy or persistence. Also, it's related to dana. So one of the things that it means is basically being able to bear what one experiences. The real test, if you look in the path of perfection of Visuddhimagga, what Buddhaghosa says is that the true test of patience is patience in the face of insult. And so, or patience in the face of being unjustly accused. I kind of turn that inside out also. It's almost harder to bear what one is justly or properly accused of. It's harder to bear one's real harmful errors. But anyway, patience is the paramita that you apply. Without patience, what Thich Nhat Hanh writes is, you face your world and you say, this is an unhappy situation. I must go somewhere else. And you'll go from place to place, wandering like the prodigal son. So there's also a wonderful gloss on patience in Shantideva's Path of the Bodhisattva. I don't know if any of you have read it. The Path of the Bodhisattva, by the way, is a commentary on the Paramitas. And it goes through all of them. But the pivotal chapter is the chapter on patience. And he talks about patience in the context of frustration. And in verse 10, he says, if there is a remedy for a situation that's difficult, what's the use of frustration? And then he says, if there is no remedy, what's the use of frustration? It's like I saw on a t-shirt once at Tassajara, somebody had a T-shirt with the motto said, "Worry is not preparation," which is pretty good. Anxiety is not preparation. It happens, though. And when it happens, what we can do as the practice of patience is really to investigate it. And investigation, this is another system, is one of the factors of enlightenment. So investigate, how is it and where is it in your body? So investigate the physical qualities and location and sensation. If there's a pain, whether it's physical or mental, is it a tightness? Is it a sticking pain? Is it a gnawing hunger? Is it in the pit of your stomach? Is it burning in your chest? Does it feel like your head is on fire? In those circumstances, look very carefully. Just investigate not why, but how is this pain manifesting? What I love are the two, to me, very resonant and creative interpretations of this paramita by Suzuki Roshi and by Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh says that Kshanti is the practice of inclusiveness, including everything. And I think this is very much in line with what Sojun Roshi's teachings always were, that we need to find a way to include everything in our field of being. And what Thich Nhat Hanh says, to suppress our pain is not the teaching of inclusiveness. We have to receive it, embrace it, and transform it. I would revise that a little bit. I think sometimes we should be careful about embracing things. Sometimes we are not ready to embrace it. Sometimes embracing it may be hazardous, but to face it. We watched, some of us last night watched quite a beautiful Burmese film about some young monks who had been left alone in the forest when their teacher went away. And one of the monks had the ability to, well, he was visited by spirits. And what he said to the spirit basically was, if I look at you, you will not have the power to frighten me. He wasn't trying to embrace it, but he wasn't turning away. What Thich Nhat Hanh says, and I fully agree with this, is if we receive it, if we do not turn away from it, this is how we make our heart big. We look deeply in order to understand. And if we don't understand, then we'll be caught in anger, in hatred, we will think that we will feel better only when the other person is punished. So he says to practice Shanti Paramita, we need the other Paramitas. If our practice of inclusiveness, of Shanti, does not bear the marks of understanding, giving, and meditation, we're just going to make the effort to suppress our pain and drive it down to the bottom of our consciousness. That is dangerous. That kind of energy will blow up later and destroy ourselves and others. I think in psychological terms, in Freudian psychological terms, that it's what's known as the return of the repressed. Whatever you repress is going to return to you in some form or another. But if you practice deep looking, your heart will grow without limits and you will suffer less. So that's Thich Nhat Hanh's expression of inclusiveness. Suzuki Roshi writes, the problem with the word patience is that it implies that we are waiting for something we are waiting for something to get better. We are waiting for something good that will come. In other words, and this is, to me, this is kind of the root cause of most of our suffering, is that we want things to be different from how they are. And so if you practice waiting because you're expecting things to be different from how they are, you're just going to continue to suffer. Suzuki Roshi writes, a more accurate word for this quality, Shanti, is constancy. A capacity to be with what is true moment after moment. And I think that's where Thich Nhat Hanh and Suzuki Roshi intersect, that capacity to be with what is true moment after moment is the capacity that we develop in practice to broaden our hearts, to be able to include whatever we encounter. Sometimes we can't do that. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes we might need to take a step back, figuratively or literally, and collect ourselves and reckon with the blow that we might have received. This is really hard. Patience is a really hard practice. The character for patience is very interesting. The ideogram in Chinese. It has two parts. The bottom part is really the radical for heart/mind, Shin. And the part above that is a sword. So it's a sword hanging over one's heart and mind. That's what the feeling of patience can be. That's why it's to me it's very clearly a practice. Some people are naturally patient, and they've been blessed. I think that I always felt that Sojin was a very unusual person, because, and I think that he was just naturally very patient, or at least that's what he had become. I'm not sure that he was always like that, but some of us are more easily plagued by our impatience, and we really have to work with it. When something comes up that's really hard to deal with, we need to step back and collect ourselves. We may need to speak to a friend. It's fine to get help to cultivate the paramita of patience. But I really, again, I come back to this expression that patience is the incinerator of defilements. If you don't have that, the defilements they'll just burn free. The incinerator creates some boundaries around it. So I think I'm going to stop there and see if there are any other questions before we finish for the evening. Feel free to ask or to comment on your own experience. Joe?
Yes, you mentioned from that book, pouring wine for the other person.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that in our American society, that our default mechanism is rugged individualism.
Yes.
And then I noticed that it manifests in the Zen community. And is the inclusiveness, is that the key to creating that community or enabling the community to take place?
Well, that's an interesting question. I want to take one quick step back and say, how do you see that manifesting in the Zen community? Roughly.
Where people, they may not seek help outright, or they'll want to do something their own way, and it may not be the right way, but they'll keep doing it that way because I was given this task and it's my task and that's what I'm going to do.
Right. I think that's one aspect of it. As you were speaking, I realized another aspect is that to some degree we're asked to give up our individuality in order to do a practice together. And that's really a remedy for an attempted remedy for our self-centeredness. But of course, you can build ego on the head of a pin. And as a culture, we're very good at that. It's true.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is. We practice and practice, and hopefully there are openings, and I'm not talking about enlightenment experiences. There are openings where we reshape or recast ourselves from what we've learned. And I will say, I've seen a lot of people for whom that's happened. And I feel to what extent that's happened in me. And one of the things that I loved when I came here was I felt that people were very kind, and that the shape of the practice was such that it was resonant with that kindness. And I wanted to be more like that.
Yeah, as in the Dr. Martin Luther King would say, the strength to love is, yeah.
And the strength to love is, what we learn, which is tough, is that the strength to love is not always the same as like.
Oh, yeah.
We love because we recognize our oneness, our connectedness. And sometimes like or not like is precisely where we have to practice patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Hozan.
Are there questions or comments? No? I think I've been through my notes. I'll give you one last chance. I've really enjoyed all the different, I've enjoyed studying myself this practice period, and also the other classes that have been given, and all the lectures by senior students. I just want to thank you all for participating. We begin sesshin tomorrow morning. I don't think that's quite registered with me yet, but it will when I get up. And I hope that we'll see many of you there. And then we'll have one day off, and then we just begin our schedule again. And, as some of you may be wondering, we are strategizing and moving towards opening step by step later in the summer. And we'll have an opportunity to talk together about all of that. But meanwhile, we have sesshin. And please enjoy sesshin. And I'm looking forward to it myself. And we'll see you in the morning. So let's chant the 4 vows and close.